I hate my stepdad, Kevin. He's one of the most annoying, controlling, and inconsiderate people I've ever met. Since he married my mom, my life has changed entirely. To put it in perspective, my parents divorced 3 years ago. And when they announced their divorce, I wasn't surprised because my mom and dad were never a fit. My stepdad took my mom and his kids on a lavish vacation, and my mom left me in the hospital after I got hurt. Although my mom technically stayed at home, she didn't enjoy any of the typical household duties that come with that role. She didn't like cooking, cleaning, or even helping me with my homework, and she made no secret of her dislike for doing those things. Instead, she preferred to spend a significant amount of her time on her phone in an attempt to develop an online following. Despite their best efforts to make it work from the beginning, there was always tension between them, especially when it came to household responsibilities. As a beauty influencer, she was constantly recording or posting something, even though her following wasn't particularly impressive. When she wasn't glued to her phone, she spent a large amount of her time using my dad's money to go out with her friends, go shopping, have brunch, or get beauty treatments. She never really fit the stereotype of a typical mother, as other parents typically check on their children's assignments to make sure they are staying up to date with their studies and ask about their daily lives. My mom's main focus was on taking care of herself. She was always worried about how I looked and expected me to be put together and fit all the time. It was almost as if she saw me more as a reflection of her image than as a person with needs of her own. Nevertheless, following the divorce, both of my parents were awarded custody of me, and my time was divided between them at first. It took me some time to get used to living in two different homes. And just as I was beginning to settle in, my mom met Kevin. She appeared to be smitten with him from the first date, and after a few days, they began dating formally. After a few weeks, my mother forced me to meet him, and I was expected to embrace him wholeheartedly. If Kevin had been a good person, I wouldn't have accepted him, but the truth is that he was wrong from the start. Kevin had these irrational expectations that I would accept him as my new father, even though he was, in my opinion, a complete downgrade from my real father. Father always meddles in my life and seems to every chance to belittle me. It seems like he always finds a way to criticize or control me. For example, he has 2 sons and gets visibly upset with me whenever he thinks I'm acting too girly. He has told me directly that I shouldn't wear dresses or tight skirts, as if my fashion choices are his concern. He also insists that I keep my long hair up in a bun at all times and expects me to keep it that way. He constantly interrupts us when we have friends over, saying he's just checking in. It's not just a quick hello or a casual question, though. He barges in and hovers around as if he doesn't trust me and my friends to be alone. It's extremely intrusive, and to be honest, it's humiliating when I object or ask him to leave us alone. He dismisses it, saying things like girls need constant supervision, and we should act as though he's not even present. It's frustrating that he doesn't interfere with his sons to the same extent, or seems to feel the need to constantly monitor their every move. When I tried to explain to my mom how much it bothered me in the hopes of receiving support or understanding, she dismissed it, telling me that he was just being protective, as if that justified his actions. On top of that, Kevin's 2 sons make my life even more difficult because they don't understand personal space, and their personalities are completely at odds with mine. They are also relentless in their bullying of me, whether it be through taunting, mocking, or coming up with new methods. When my mom decided to marry Kevin after only a year of dating, she expected me to just follow suit. She told me unequivocally that she loved Kevin and was determined to make their marriage work. She knew I had doubts and frustrations, but she was clear about what she wanted from me: to give Kevin a chance and not to make things difficult for her. Instead of intervening, they constantly pick on me to make me feel small. And instead of intervening, my mom dismisses their behavior by saying that's how all sons bond. It felt like a lot to ask, especially considering how quickly things were happening. But I wanted to help her and maintain harmony, so I agreed to try. Ever since, I've tried to accept Kevin and his sons. I've tried to follow his routines and adjust to the changes, even though it hasn't been easy. One of the things that irritates me the most is that Kevin insists that I call him Dad. It doesn't feel right, and every time I say it, I can't help but feel resentment building inside of me. I already have a dad, and I don't want to replace him yet. Kevin doesn't seem to understand or care that it's hard for me. But beyond the name, what's painful is the shift in my mom's attention and priorities after her marriage. She seems more focused on Kevin's sons than on me. She spends more time with them, helps them with things she never did for me, and acts more like a mother to them than she ever has with me. I sometimes feel like I've lost my place in her life. She is only ever a mom to Kevin's sons now. I'd love to live with my dad, especially because I think he generally wants to help. But every time he mentions it, my mom shuts him down and tells him to back off. He is more understanding, but he had to move away after he got a new job in another city that paid much better. He still comes to see me occasionally, but I live with mom full time and I also talk on the phone frequently. He is aware of some of the problems I have with Kevin and his sons because I've opened up to him about them, and he is supportive, often insists that he shouldn't meddle in her marriage. Over the years, I tried my hardest to adapt to life with my new family. I've made a sincere attempt to get along with Kevin and his sons in the hopes that we could develop a positive relationship if I remain patient and open, but I still feel invisible in my family. This year, Kevin unexpectedly got promoted at work, and when he returned home, he proudly announced that he would be taking the whole family on vacation. The news made us all feel important, excited, especially since it had been so long since we had taken a vacation together. He and Mom chose the destination, booked tickets, and made reservations for the whole family. However, he and I were driving home from shopping for some clothes for the trip when a car unexpectedly slammed into us from behind. It wasn't a serious collision, but it was enough to throw us off balance and cause some injuries, though my mom was largely unharmed. Wear and there, but I wasn't so fortunate because I ended up with a broken arm and a concussion from the impact. The ambulance was called, and before I knew it, I was being admitted to the hospital. When Kevin first learned about our accident, he hurried to the hospital with a worried expression. At first, I thought he was genuinely concerned about my mom and me, showing up because he cared about our well-being. However, he kept bringing up the trip, obsessing over whether or not we'd still be able to go, and worried that the money he had spent would go to after a while. The doctors told us that I would need to stay in the hospital for a few days for observation because I had suffered a concussion. They wanted to make sure I was okay before letting me go home, but travel was definitely out of the question for me. Kevin looked at me angrily, as if I was to blame for the accident and for wasting his money. My mom offered to stay with me, which gave me some hope that she would choose to be there for me during such a trying time. But Kevin was quick to he then turned to me and told me that at my age, I should be perfectly capable of staying at the hospital alone for a few days. He pointed out how safe the hospital was, with doctors and nurses on call 24/7, implying that I had nothing to worry about. Since our plane tickets were already paid for, he claimed that we were already losing money with me staying behind and that it wouldn't make sense for my mom to waste even more money by staying behind. Kevin continued by insisting that once I was discharged, he had made arrangements for I begged my mom to stay with me because I wasn't comfortable staying at the hospital alone or having a babysitter come to look after me at home. Instead, my mom tried to defend me by telling Kevin that it wasn't appropriate to just leave me alone in the hospital. She knew it was wrong, but Kevin continued to push back, saying that my mom's presence was unnecessary and that her staying would only mean sitting by my side and doing nothing productive the entire day. He didn't see me as his biological child, so he wasn't concerned about how I felt or what happened to me. It seemed like her presence was pointless, ignoring the emotional support she could give him. I tried to argue that at 15, I shouldn't be left alone in the hospital. I was afraid and in pain, and the thought of going through all of it without any family members around was overwhelming. I proposed a compromise, saying that perhaps Mom could call my dad to come down and stay with me while she and Kevin were away. I knew it would take him a little while to get here because he lives in a different city, but I was sure he would come right away if he knew I was in the hospital. I thought this might be a way for them to continue their trip while making sure I wasn't alone, but Kevin shot the idea down almost immediately, dismissing my worries. He said I was being silly and making a big deal out of minor injuries, making worry needlessly. Kevin said that there was no reason to ruin someone else's plans over something as minor as a broken arm and a concussion, which would heal perfectly with a few days of hospital rest. Ultimately, Kevin's pressure worked, and I looked to my mother in the hopes that she would resist and insist on staying with me. But as usual, she gave in to Kevin instead of standing up for what I needed. She stayed with me for just one night, which gave me some solace, and I held on to the hope that perhaps when she saw how vulnerable I felt, she would realize that I needed her there. However, the following day, Kevin arrived at the hospital to pick her up, eager to leave on the trip as scheduled, without giving any thought to how I was doing. My mom left me alone at the hospital, and after just one day, I felt abandoned and betrayed. I couldn't contain my tears any longer. One of the nurses saw that I was crying, and when she realized that no one was around to check on me, she graciously offered to call my mom. I told her it was. I was half expecting my dad to reprimand me or tell me, as my stepdad had, that I was overreacting and that being alone in the hospital wasn't a big deal, but she insisted, so I gave her my dad's number. When my dad answered the phone and the nurse told him about my predicament, he was immediately concerned and sounded more worried than I had heard him in a long time. He asked me if my mom had left on the trip without me, and I explained the whole thing. My dad was furious when I told him everything, and I could feel his anger building. He then told me that my mom had only mentioned that we'd been in a minor fender bender, downplaying the entire situation. She hadn't mentioned a single word about my broken arm or my concussion, or that she and Kevin would be leaving me alone in the hospital, according to what she said. I told him that Kevin had insisted that it was okay to leave me because he didn't want the trip money to go to waste, and that Mom had finally agreed to go along with it. I told him there was nothing to worry about, so he hadn't felt the need to contact me. Learning that my mother had purposefully misled my father about my circumstances made me feel even more betrayed and hurt. My father immediately promised to come over as soon as possible, telling me he would drop everything, drive to the hospital, and stay with me for however long it took. This was the first time since I had been admitted, and I felt relieved that my father would be joining me. Finally, someone was taking my situation seriously, and as I sat there waiting, I realized just how much I needed that kind of support in my life. Within just 2 hours, my dad arrived at the hospital, and seeing him walk through the door felt like a huge weight had lifted off my chest. I started to cry as he hugged me and reassured me that everything was going to be okay. He then immediately went to speak with my doctors, making sure he understood every detail of my injuries. I could see the relief on his face when he confirmed that while my dad's anger toward Kevin was evident, he was furious that my stepdad had the gall to treat my needs so casually and then decide to go on a trip rather than make sure I was taken care of. His injuries were severe and painful, but they weren't life-threatening. He was very sorry for not being there for me sooner and for not challenging my mom's version of events. He told me he regretted believing that everything was fine without checking in on me directly, and it was obvious that he was beating himself up over it. The respect and consideration Kevin showed me by leaving me to handle things alone in the hospital demonstrated how little I meant to him. His actions made it obvious that even though I was in a relationship with my mother, I was nothing more than a bother to him. My father tried to call both Mom and Kevin, but neither of them answered, which infuriated him even more. He vowed to punish Kevin and Mom for leaving me in such a manner, and throughout the following 2 nights, my father lay by my side after taking a leave of absence, worked to ensure that I wouldn't be alone, and he didn't leave me until I was eventually released. Even then, he wasn't comfortable with me returning to Kevin's house, where I would be left alone until everyone got back. Instead, he insisted that I come home with him, so I did. After I had settled at my dad's house, he tried contacting Mom once more, but she said she had missed his earlier calls because she was enjoying herself so much with Kevin and his sons. This only made him even more irate, and he clarified that he was willing to report her and Kevin for their actions by telling her that her behavior was unacceptable, that leaving me in the hospital was a serious act of neglect, and that he planned to take legal action to hold them both accountable. He even mentioned taking her to court if necessary so she could lose custody of me. Ever since, my phone has been buzzing with calls and texts from both Kevin and my mom, but they have not acknowledged what they did, or they've been sending me message after message claiming that I ruined their vacation by telling my dad about my predicament. Kevin has even gone so far as to say that all I needed to do was keep my mouth shut and quietly stay in the hospital without making the fuss. They claimed that everything would have been okay if I had just complied with them. Finally, after giving it some thought and speaking with my dad, I realized that I should apologize to everyone. It's difficult to admit, but I allowed myself to be pushed aside for their convenience on numerous occasions over the years when Kevin and Mom neglected me. I stayed silent in the hopes that things would change, but they never did. Looking back, I can't believe I put up with it for so long. For instance, Kevin regularly damaged my relationship with my dad by calling him names like a deadbeat or a loser compared to him. When I have had problems at home or try to talk to Mom about them, Kevin always brushes off my feelings by saying that I make a big deal out of things or that I'm just too sensitive because I'm a girl. He frequently claims that is why he's so fortunate to have only sons. Kevin also consistently shows favoritism towards his sons, even in the smallest day-to-day interactions, and he doesn't mind giving them money. Kevin firmly believed that my dad wasn't a husband to my mom, so he had the right to criticize my dad. Whenever I ask my mom for anything, Kevin questions me endlessly and always says that I'm wasting money and buying unnecessary things, even though it's my dad's money, so I'm free to spend it however I want. Even though we live in the same house, we never spent quality time together as a family because Kevin and Mom would frequently make plans with his sons and leave me out, saying they didn't want to bother me or that they wanted to spend. Kevin and Mom rarely included me in their plans, and they don't like to celebrate my birthdays. They always tell me that since Kevin's sons don't make a big deal out of their birthdays, I shouldn't expect much either, as if I don't deserve it. frequently left me feeling abandoned and unimportant. They would go out to dinner or do things that they enjoyed without thinking that I might want to be included. It is probably why I was so excited to join them on the vacation. Any extra care simply because it's not their style, and when it comes to gifts, I wind up receiving things that I don't even like or use, as if they don't care enough to consider what I would enjoy. Whenever I was having trouble in school, Kevin would say things like, "You're just lazy, that's your problem," or "Why do you even bother with that stuff?" Instead of asking what was wrong or offering assistance, he made it about how it bothered him. Mom, on the other hand, would simply remain silent, offering no consolation or words of support. Encouragement, even though she knew how much it was impacting me. Accordingly, my dad did report Mom and Stepdad to CPS. It wasn't an easy decision, but he felt it was necessary to make sure that what had happened wasn't forgotten. He couldn't just sit back and let them treat me that way, leaving me in the hospital without thinking twice. When Kevin and my mom got home, CPS officials contacted them, and they had to respond to a series of questions outlining the situation, their actions, and their decision. I'm sure it was that they probably weren't prepared for this wake-up call, but the authorities agreed with my dad that it was unacceptable to leave me in the hospital, especially after I had been hurt. They also acknowledged that I had been neglected in a way that jeopardized my health. Later, my mom called me, and I could tell by her tone that she was upset with me. She claimed that I had gotten her and Kevin into a lot of trouble by involving CPS, which felt like she was blaming me for what had happened, even though I knew I wasn't at fault. I argued with my mother that I didn't feel comfortable lying to the authorities and that perhaps she should have considered the consequences of her actions when she left me at the hospital that day. She also warned me that CPS would be contacting me next to get my side of the story. My mother then persisted in urging me to lie to the authorities, saying that if I didn't, I might be taken away from her and she would lose custody of me. Life, and that I needed to prove my loyalty to her this time. She gave the impression that I was going to betray her by telling the truth to the authorities, as if I was responsible for everything that occurred. However, what got to me was when she said that lying would also protect Kevin and his sons, explaining that the CPS investigation could end up causing problems for Kevin, particularly with his ex-wife, who might learn about it and use it as justification to hold him accountable. I simply shook my head as I felt that my mother seemed more worried about her reputation and that of my stepdad than she was about what I had gone through. She never once asked me how I was doing or if I had recovered, but instead kept begging me to lie and protect her family. I couldn't stand her selfishness any longer, so I told her in no uncertain terms that I didn't care how this affected her and Kevin, but that I wouldn't be lying to the authorities. I told her that I would be telling them the truth about what had happened, and I wouldn't. Update 3. It's been nearly 2 weeks since my last update, and I've spoken to the authorities and told them the truth. From now, I will be staying with my dad. If this meant she and Kevin were in trouble, then so be it. They were the adults here, and they were the ones who messed up, so I wasn't going to shield them from the consequences of their actions. My mom yelled at me some more and called me derogatory names, but I didn't give in. Looking into school so I can live with him here permanently. I must admit that it feels to live with him. Mom has been trying to guilt-trip me, but there is nothing else she can do at this time. CPS has issued a warning to her, saying that she ignored her duty to me and that she must make major changes, such as attending required parenting classes and counseling to address her neglect issues. Kevin's relationship with me was also examined because he had demonstrated a lack of regard and concern for me, particularly during the hospital incident. CPS clarified that they would be closely monitoring the situation if and when I moved in with them, and that any additional abuse or neglect would result in more severe repercussions. Update 4. It's hard to believe that I've been living with Dad for almost 4 months now. I feel like I'm finally in a place where I'm not constantly unsure of my value or walking on eggshells. Dad's support has been a relief. I feel heard here. I can discuss my day, my struggles, and my dreams, and he genuinely cares. I've been able to focus more on school and my mental health, and I feel like I'm finally returning to who I am. I've also made some wonderful new friends at school, and I genuinely love spending time with them. Most importantly, he respects my space and my decisions. It's been a complete 180 compared to what I was dealing with before. Last month was the first time in a long time that I was able to celebrate my birthday. As for Mom, things are still complicated. She's been trying to get in touch with me more lately, even sending me texts about how sorry she is and how much she misses me. Part of me feels for staying away, but then I remember everything that led to this point, and I've made it clear to her that I'm still not ready to come back. I invited all my friends over, and we had a pizza party while watching corny romantic movies. It was the kind of birthday I'd always wanted but never received when I lived with my mom and Kevin. As for Kevin, he hasn't apologized or accepted any responsibility for his actions, and to be honest, I'm not surprised because he's never shown any genuine concern for me or my well-being. The way he treated me, especially when I was in the hospital, is something I'll never forget. Whether he changes or not doesn't matter to me anymore. I'm not waiting around to find out because I've learned to rely on myself and the people who care about me, genuinely care about me, and that's sufficient.